While Sarah is logging in, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Adela Mizrachi, and this is Rebecca Kane, friend of mine. And so I'm the founder of Podcast Brunch Club, and Podcast Brunch Club is a little bit different, I think, from a lot of the sessions that are happening today. I think that a lot of the sessions happening today for International Podcast Day are from the creator side. And I represent actually the listener side of things. So Podcast Brunch Club is exactly like book club, but for podcasts. And it's international, it's global. So we have chapters on 4 continents. People listen to them on their own time, and then we get together in person and online to talk about them. So I'll give you an example. And the example for this month is higher education. We listened to Malcolm Gladwell's revisionist history podcast, and the episode was My Little 100 Million. We listened to the Intelligence Squared debate podcast, and the question that they were debating was, do too many kids go to college? And then we listened to The Measure of Everyday Life, and the episode was college readiness. So everybody listened on their own time, and then we had a really great discussion here in Chicago. We had 9 people meet for brunch, which is why it's called Podcast Brunch Club, but not all of the clubs or chapters, not all of the clubs or chapters meet for brunch. They meet whenever is good for them. So I love having podcast creators participate. It's a great way for you to get some input from or feedback from listeners about what they like about podcasts, what they don't like about podcasts. It's a great way for you to branch out and listen to different types of podcasts yourself. So as we wait for Sarah to join us, I see that she's having a little bit of technical difficulty. What I wanted to do is introduce my friend here, Rebecca Kane. She is a member of Podcast Brunch Club. She's participated in a number of them, and she's actually helping me launch my own podcast. So I will be a creator very soon. I will have a Podcast Brunch Club podcast. I know it's very meta, but it is what it is. So this is Rebecca. Rebecca, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, great. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Rebecca Kane, and I actually am a life coach, and more specifically, I work with people in job and career and life transition, and I work with people to empower them to get through blocks and those difficult in-between stages. So I am founder of Tell a New Story Coaching, and I am having a lot of fun with Adela, not only with Podcast Brunch Club, but with helping her as she begins to, which I'm really excited about. And I too have been inspired and really gearing up towards the end of the year or by January to have my own podcast as well, as a way to
well, looks
She's
like
coming back.
let's try and get them back again here.
Okay.
Hi. Okay. Hi. So I'm seeing a message that says the sound quality is okay, okay, sound quality terrible and breaking up.
Yeah, it's on your end.
I hope it's on our end?
Yes.
Oh no. I wasn't having an issue earlier listening to stuff, so I guess it's...
You're rolling now. Go ahead and continue.
Okay, so this is Rebecca. She just introduced herself. She's from Tell a New Story Coaching, and she will be also launching a podcast soon. And Sarah, hi. How are you?
Good morning.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Sarah De Silva. I have a couple of projects. My one main project has a little side project. I have a website. It's called audiblefeast.com. Audible like the service, the audio service, and feast like you want to eat a good feast of podcasts. So what I do is I review and recommend podcasts. I started listening to tons of stuff last year when I was traveling a ton for work, and I was on these long road trips, and I was like, I can't listen to music anymore. I need something for my brain. And so I started looking for podcast recommendations or reviews, and I came up short at the time. Since then, quite a few other people have kind of joined in this reviewing world, but I don't know. I think my reviews are unique because they're super subjective. Either usually I love it or I hate it, but I like reviewing independent podcasts. If somebody has something they want to send to me, I'm totally happy to review it and take a listen to it. I listen to podcasts nonstop all day long, exercising, at work, whatever. So, and then I have a newsletter that goes with that. It's at tinyletter.com/audiblefeast. It's a little bit extra bonus content. It's a little bit different stuff than what's on the website, but that's what I do.
Yeah. It's a great newsletter. I can vouch for it. It's really interesting because the way that Sarah does her reviews is she actually breaks it down by different subtopics. So can you remind us what the different areas that so she gives like 5-star ratings or up to 5-star ratings on different categories. So what are the categories again?
So I have, I think there are 8 categories, and I have, well, my favorite one is, does it make me a better person? But yeah, and I get a lot of comments on that here and there. People say like, oh, that makes sense. Like I wouldn't want to listen to something if I feel like, oh, I didn't feel good after listening to that. Storytelling value is one. Educational value, pop culture value, host listening, like does this host sound like somebody I could listen to or not? Production value is another good one that I added, and flow is in with that production value. Humor, super important. I think there's a couple others, and I also give out a bonus star occasionally, and that's usually if somebody has an awesome website that goes with their podcast. I've given it out most frequently for.
Yeah. And it's also really awesome because she then also has on her website, she has a section where she breaks down all of her reviews. So it's like one page. So you can see the list of all the 5-star reviews and all the 4-star reviews and all the 3-stars. So that if you're new to, listening to podcasts and you want some good recommendations on where to cut your teeth, it's a great place to start. So what I was thinking we could do, because I know that our audience are podcast creators and also podcast listeners, because I can't imagine that there's a single podcast creator out there that doesn't also listen to podcasts. But I was thinking what we could do is just kind of give people a sense of what a little podcast brunch club discussion would be like. And with, keeping in mind that we'll keep it short. But the idea is to get people talking to each other about the podcast they listen to, because as we all know, we're usually walking around with headphones or earbuds in, not paying attention to our surroundings, or we completely forget where we are. I mean, I often say, that I'll be walking around and I'll be compelled by something and I'll look around, to see if I could talk to somebody about it, only to realize that, I'm listening with earbuds in and nobody else heard it. So this is a good way for, the Podcast Brunch Club kind of concept came out of that, because I wanted to get people together, just like reading a book is a solitary experience and a book club is a way for people to engage over that content. I wanted to create a forum for people to do that. So I thought, since it's September, we could talk about the podcasts that we listened to for September, which, like I said, were the Malcolm Glad. I don't know, actually, I think I may have cut out at that point in time, but we have 3 podcasts that we we all listen to separately. And then we get together in our smaller groups in person and talk about them. So the podcast that we listened to for September, the theme was higher education. We listened to the Revisionist History podcast by Malcolm Gladwell. My Little 100 Million was the episode we listened to. The Measure of Everyday Life episode on college readiness, and then Intelligence Squared US. It's a debate style podcast, and the question was, do too many kids go to college? So you can actually find those podcasts and links to those podcasts on my website. So if you go to podcastbrunchclub.com/higher-ed, you will find those podcasts. And then just for your information, if you'd like to join Podcast Brunch Club, I'd love to have you. Go to the website. You can sign up for the newsletter. There's an in-person tab if you want to start an in-person chapter. Join the Facebook group. But next month, so starting, what is that, tomorrow is next month, is the theme is fear, in kind of tipping our hat to Halloween. And we'll be talking about podcast episodes that kind of talk about fear and what does fear do for us. And this would be a great opportunity for you to kind of chip in, because I know that you work with a lot of clients about how to get over fears and things like that. So anyway, so I thought we could talk about the podcast for a short time, and then we could talk a little bit more about our projects. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. So I guess the first question is, had either of you listened to any of these podcasts before?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, I had listened to Revisionist History. The other two I had not listened to. And I really did not like Revisionist History. It's one of my, least favorite ones from this year. And with the exception of those 3 episodes right in the middle about higher education. So,
that way.
Yeah. So, I had started to listen to it. I was like, oh, it's at the top of the charts. Of course I have to check it out. But, and it's Malcolm Gladwell, so I should check it out. But, I was kind of disappointed in it, but the other 2 I had not heard of. So that was awesome. Super exciting to hear of new shows that somebody specifically had recommended.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to listen to Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History, as well as the Intelligence Squared, Too Many Kids Go to College. And I like Sarah, didn't really fully enjoy. I love Malcolm Gladwell, so I think I was kind of surprised. But what I really did find interesting was the Intelligence Squared piece and debate, and having these 4 individuals share their thoughts and ideas and opinions about what the value is now in our society of a bachelor's education, and posing these ideas around how to truly serve young people as they transition from high school into preparing for the work world and contributing to society. And one thing I will point out that I found really interesting was this concept or question posed of vocational training, and how we're losing the trades, and how just in general we have so many young adults who aren't maybe ready for college. And so now, as Adela and I shared previously when we talked about it, like there are so many choices for people to take a gap year and programs that support them, to travel, to do AmeriCorps, Vista programs, and volunteer and do community service, and really be engaged and connected to diverse communities in a different way, as opposed to the academic realm. So I found it really interesting. Those are just a few thoughts.
I mean, so for me, I've seen so many people like hate Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, and I think a lot of people do like feel the same way that you do about those 3 in the middle. It was like the 3-part series about education, which were really well done. But I guess, so in terms of that particular episode, do you think he made his case? Do you think that he made his case that like we should not, basically, for me, I'm going to summarize for people who maybe hadn't heard the episode. Basically, Malcolm Gladwell was getting into educational philanthropy and asking the question, why are all these billionaires and these educational philanthropists donating so much money to the institutions that don't need the money? Like, they already have $22 billion in their endowment. So he makes this case, there's this distinction between the strong link, the strong link game and the weak link game. So a strong link game is something like basketball, where you have your superstar and he can basically carry the whole team. And then the weak link game is something like soccer, where you have to have all of your players be good in order for the team to excel. And it doesn't matter if you have a superstar. And his case is basically that education is a weak link game, and we do not need to be giving, Harvard and Stanford $400 million in one fell swoop, or, when they already have $22 billion in the bank. So do you think he made his case?
I think he was, I think it was pretty good. I think, he was a little swept up in his emotion about, I remember him getting so mad at the guy from Princeton or wherever it was from, or Stanford, I guess. And just like being like so emotionally, like so shocked, like, I cannot believe you're doing this, taking all this money. And you don't think that, he said something about, you don't think that, like, what would you do with this money? And the administrator said, well, I'm sure we would find something to do with it. Like that blows your mind, I guess, as a person who's gone to college, and you think like, oh my gosh, I could use that money. Like, why don't you give it back to the students? Why don't you put it back into, why do you need to build another pool or whatever, like things that some people use, but not that many people use, and have somebody's name be on another building. Like, I don't know, it does feel like, so I guess it resonated with me as, thinking about like where those dollars could go, and having been to school and having tons of student loans, I think about, like what those endowments mean, like why is that really important? But I also see, like, I went to a pretty strong research oriented school, so I can see the benefit of money like that going into facilities that can help you with your research, like nanotechnology labs, stuff like that. It just seems like his point was a lot of this stuff goes to stuff, a lot of the money goes to stuff that is like, why are we putting money into that? And I really appreciated the perspective of that Rowan College or Rowan University, the one in New Jersey, about thinking about like how, like, it just, I don't know, it was good. I just appreciated that perspective.
Right. I mean, it's like, I was saying, I think I made this analogy. It's like as if Bill Gates would ask for donations to pay his mortgage. Like, that's almost like the analogy that I see in my head of Stanford asking for so much money, because, and then also on top of it, charging so much, so if you're going to get that much money, at least let it trickle down to the students a little bit. Why have every single student come out of your school with so much debt? And that just seems like a disservice. And I get it. I mean, I work at a university. I work at Northwestern University. It's a great school. I think we just got a donation of $10.25 million, and that's toward our $3 billion goal. But, they still charge an arm and a leg for, tuition. And according to Malcolm Gladwell, that's not even a drop in the bucket of what helps them sustain their, their programming. So I'm like, well, if it's not even a drop in the bucket, why don't you just do away with it and let people go for free? I mean, still base it on merit. But it was frustrating. And for me to see him get so emotional about it, actually, I enjoyed it, because I think that's the way I would get. I feel like somebody needs to like put their foot down and just kind of call them out on all of the nonsense, and I feel like his emotional outcry was sort of justified and kind of hammered the point home a little bit. It really kind of got to the listener being like, whoa, he really thinks this is a big idea. Because if he had said it all like straight-laced and, even keeled, I think the listener may have just walked away with like, he doesn't really feel that strongly about it and whatever. But because he was emotional about it, it really kind of hit you with, wow, yeah, he's really passionate about that. So I know, sorry, do you have?
No, that's
I know that Sarah, that you had mentioned to me that you had never heard the Intelligence Squared one, and that after listening to the selections for the month that you really enjoyed it and added it to your list, which is like so exciting for me, because that's one of the reasons that I started Podcast Brunch Club, is because I wanted to give people an opportunity to check out different podcasts. I don't like to always select the This American Lives and the, and the Radio Labs, even though I love those podcasts and I'm an avid listener of those podcasts. I want to give people an opportunity to kind of check out different ones. So I'm glad that I gave you the opportunity and that you liked it.
Yeah. So as soon I was listening to it, I was out on a walk and I was listening and I was like, oh my God, I don't want this show to end. So Intelligence Squared is roughly an hour, I would say, and they have a debate, and it's just a recording of a debate. That's what it is. And they have, at least the one that we listened to had two people on two different sides of an issue, and they were considered experts in the field that they were talking about. So I loved that. It was like very like academic, but still with like a real practical, bent to it. And I loved that. I thought, I was, as soon as it was done, I was looking for like what other cool topics have they debated. I have one on my list right now for the climate change one, like just, so fascinating. Like these people that they truly, truly believe in their position and they have the research to back it up. Like, so listening to something like that, I feel like that makes me smarter, because typically you land on one side of something you feel strongly about. And I think it's just so good to hear the other side, and just maybe you'll change your mind a little bit. And I really like how the debates are set up where at the end they measure the audience, how much they've changed from their original position. So it's not so much that you convinced me to think the other way, but how much did we kind of shift from what you originally thought? I thought that was really cool and innovative, and also was that's like a cool surprise. Like you don't know what's going to happen in the end. You can think who you thought, maybe did a better job, but it was really cool to see who the audience thought did a better job.
Yeah, they measure, I think they asked the question, so the question for this particular debate was, do too many kids go to college? And so as I think the audience walked in, they asked that question of the audience. They polled them basically. So there were yes, no, and undecided. And then they polled them again afterward. And whoever changed the most percentage points won the debate. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I think, yes, too many kids go to college won the debate. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little surprising, but barely by 1 percentage point or something. I think they increased by 7 percentage points, and the other increased by 6. So that was I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is a great way just to hear different perspectives, because we sometimes, as you're talking about, Sarah, we naturally have a tendency of you to go to a certain side of something, an issue, and that's great. We advocate for that, but to really allow ourselves to open up and just appreciate and hear diverse perspectives, it's easy for us to get locked into what we see, and it is a very cool way and format to present these issues to people and get them thinking.
And now that you actually say that actually brings up the point of that's exactly what Malcolm Gladwell does not do, and maybe why people get frustrated with his podcast is because it is very much his soapbox, which, I think that's okay. I don't know. I don't have as big of a problem with it as other people do, because it's his podcast. He can say what he wants. He doesn't have to present the other side if he doesn't want to, and when I have my podcast, I don't know how much, I'll try to get different opinions, but I don't know how much I will. But yeah, he's definitely the have about it. So, and then, so the college readiness episode, I know there was I think just generally there wasn't a lot of great feedback about that one. And I hate saying negative things, but I will tell you, I will be honest, when I chose this podcast, actually recommended by the podcast host, I thought it was okay. It was reasonably done. My problem with it is that it's funded, and I don't know if you picked up on this, and I think I mentioned this to you, but it's actually funded by RTI, which is, did you figure that out, Sarah?
No.
Did you know that? That RTI, the underwriter.
Okay.
It's like a sponsored podcast, it seems. So, and then they featured an RTI. RTI is like a big research institution, nonprofit research institution.
Mm-hmm.
And so this podcast is funded by RTI, which I think is, whatever, that's fine. But then I was curious, like, why do you always have, it seemed like a lot of the guests that they have are RTI researchers. So I don't know how much of this is a podcast about kind of broad, advertising what they're doing and all the good work, which I'm sure is great work. I know RTI, I know they have a great reputation, but it did feel a little bit like, okay, so are the projects that you're highlighting about college readiness and the research that you're highlighting about college readiness, is that all research that you've done, or that somehow like RTI has gotten federal funding to do? So I did feel like that again was a little bit skewed,
Yeah, I felt like it was a little bit slow for me. But I did perk up a little bit listening to the statistics. That's what I do for a living, is a lot of statistics and stuff. So I perked up a little bit listening to when they were talking about how many, out of how many students, like if you kind of break it down backwards, like how many students go to college and then how many like are really ready for high school, and then like how far back it goes about people really being ready for college. But I guess, I think what I learned from all of these episodes was like higher ed is maybe a more controversial topic than I previously thought. Like, I think I probably just took it for granted. Like, I went to college and I have a ton of student loans, and like, I was probably the right person to go to college, and that's it. Like, I mean, like that, I just think about it in my own like worldview. And so that is why I listen to podcasts, because I don't need to be in my own worldview all the time. So that's what I think I really got from, it's just thinking about it in a different way. There was a similar, I think it was a reveal episode not too long ago that talked similarly about some being ready for college, and like it was about in Texas where I live. We have a system here about like the top 10% of kids can get into a state college. The top 10% academically in high school can get into a state college, guaranteed. And there's some controversy over that because you could live in a very disadvantaged place and be in the top 10%. And then can you really compete with the top 10% in other area, people that came from a very advantaged school? And then also the more advantaged school districts, do they just basically inflate grades so that, like you end up with like a 4.5 GPA? Like, what does that even mean? So anyway, like I've been more interested in the topic. So it was a really timely theme for me. And I was happy. What I like about Podcast Brunch Club is it's just a suggestion of just 3 episodes. Like I probably listen to like 100 things at least in a month. And so just thinking about 3 things, how they tie together, and just different perspectives about a topic. You don't have to agree with everything. It's just like look at things in 3 different ways. And I really like that. It's not super tons of commitment or anything. It's just, and I do really appreciate as well the idea of like, when you listen to something, you're usually listening by yourself. When I listen to something, I almost always, on every single thing I listen to, I think of someone that would love this episode. And I'm just like I don't know, I made new friends because of it. I've, gotten people into podcasting because I'm passionate about it, and then I pass it on, and then,
right.
My one friend that has written a couple of reviews for me, Christine, couple of guest reviews. She was just telling me the other day, she said, thank you so much for getting me into podcasting. Like I listened to a little, NPR here and there before, but she said like, it's just opened up my world of listening to all kinds of new stuff. So, I don't know. So that's what I think is cool about your project, Adela.
Thank you. And I mean, I think, for me, it's like, I just don't have the bandwidth to read anymore with, the way that things go and, work and projects and all those things, podcasting is something, I mean, I know thousands and thousands of people have said this, but it's something that you can do, wherever. You can do it while you're doing dishes. You could do it while you're making dinner. You could do it while you're commuting. And, obviously reading is not something you can do while you're driving. I mean, audiobooks, I think, are changing that, but, audiobooks are also very long and can be a little overwhelming. And so for me, it's like, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever. I don't listen to any of those podcasts that go much more than an hour. Like I know there's that, a really deep dive into history, the 4-hour one. Have you guys heard this one?
No,
I can't do. Do you know what I'm talking about, Sarah?
Yeah, Harlan's Hardcore History. Yeah.
Oh, she's frozen.
Yeah.
Really frozen.
Maybe it was because of my coughing. Yeah, the hardcore history. Yeah, I have never listened to it, but I have a few pod review friends that love it. But no, I feel like that is like a huge, I'm sure the show is awesome. I mean, it is always trending high and everything but I feel like, for me, yeah, anything more than an hour is a lot. And because I think I'm a listener who wants to, consume a lot. So I want to try different things. So maybe if you're super into history, then that's perfect because you can just sit and listen for a long time and have something like on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whatever for a long time.
Yeah, there's so much more to choose from now. And
Yeah, I think it looks like my internet is really bad and I'm turning off all of my stuff. So I don't know if
Is my video down?
well,
I don't know what to do. I'm plugged in. I turned off all my stuff. You know what? Give me a second. Let me just go.
I'll keep talking. So yeah, I think, I mean, and people have different, I mean, I'm just one like consumer of podcasts, but the stuff that's like, I even like the shows that are like 10 minutes or less. Like, I feel like that's awesome. Sometimes you can get such a, it's nice sometimes just to get a short little glimpse into something there, especially some of the local community type of shows where, you're just interviewing like a, somebody that's in your neighborhood. Like I love the ones that are from Local or the Project with Air Media. Those, I feel like you don't need a, super long, 30-minute interview. Like, I mean, it certainly takes a lot more time to develop something like that. So I like podcasts of all different lengths, but more than an hour is tough for me.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, so you had mentioned that you started on podcasts when, you just sort of discovered them, and then like what did you cut your teeth on? Like, what was your first love, I guess?
Well, I started with This American Life, and a guy that I work with said, oh, I was doing this 3-hour commute, every week. And, so I had 3 hours to this plant that I was going to and 3 hours back. And so he was like, he said he made the trip often. And he said, why don't you try, just throw it on your phone, plug it into the, you plug it into the car and listen to This American Life. And how he hooked me was he said, there's a lot of narcissistic people on there that think this is really awesome. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. So, you know, I think I love storytelling. That is probably my number one genre that I really like. But I also like things that are educational. I love like The Intelligence Squared, like Planet Money, things that where I feel like I learn about something in the world that is like that I otherwise would not know about. And in that same vein, I've been really exploring more LGBT minority led podcasts. I'm really liking the new Historically Black. I like there's one called Alter Ego that's really interesting. That's really cool. It's about people who have an alter ego, and the show's tagline is everyone has one. So it's pretty interesting, like just hearing about people's side, you know, whatever. Like it's like their other side of them. They just interviewed a woman who had a very conservative life, and she decided to go to Burning Man. So they interviewed her before, during, and after she went to Burning Man. So it's really cool. Like that's just like, I want to know about stuff I don't know about. And at the same time, I appreciate a good story. Right. What about you guys?
I think the podcast that got me hooked was Radiolab. I started listening because a friend recommended it, and I was going on vacation. I was going on a beach vacation, which, you know, there's like nothing to do, just sit by the beach. And I just couldn't read, like the sun, and just, I couldn't. And listening to music, I mean, I like music, but it doesn't occupy my mind enough, you know, like, especially like the one thing that I will say about podcasts that I love is like, I love working out with podcasts, because music just does not do it for me. You know, I'm still like watching the clock. Like, when is my 30 minutes up? You know, and with podcasts, my mind goes there and I forget about the clock altogether. And then sometimes I'll be like, I'm just going to stay on this until the podcast is over, and then I'll be on longer than I originally intended. But I mean, I literally figured out a way. This is so funny. I put my hair up in a bun, and I stuck my, I had like a Bluetooth receiver so that I could like I could go into the pool or into the ocean and still get radio in my ears. It was pretty funny. I mean, I'm pretty sure I listened to every single episode that was available on iTunes by the time that vacation was done.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How are you?
Well, I mean, I'm still, I would say, kind of new to learning about all the choices out there, actually a little overwhelmed by how many podcasts are available. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Like what, Sarah, you've created for people is an opportunity for people to really look and get recommendations, get an idea of what's out there that they're interested in and resonates with them. But Radiolab for me too, because Adela, along with some other core friends that we're connected to, had, you know, recommended to me, and I'm a huge reader. Like, just I love to read, and I love books. You know, I haven't even made the transition to a Kindle. So, you know, this idea of, wow, there's just so much that you can, you know, take in through podcasts, and I love to learn. I'm just a constant learner of, again, like both of you have shared, just hearing different views and perspectives. And so it's really very cool and exciting for me to still be discovering what's out there and available.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important, you know, speaking to sort of the podcasting community, you know, to kind of, you know, continue to explore, you know, so I find myself sometimes just, sticking to my regulars. You know, I have the ones I subscribe to, and that list is getting longer and longer and longer, which is good, but also sometimes overwhelming when I haven't listened in a couple days and all of a sudden I have, you know, 10 new podcast episodes I have to listen to. But you know, to continue to explore, because, you know, there's always new podcasts coming out, and people are always pivoting or changing it up a little bit. And I always think, and I was actually talking to somebody else, that when I start a new podcast, I feel like I'm not doing it justice by listening to one episode. It's almost like walking into somebody else's home and being asked to feel comfortable. You don't yet feel comfortable there. You know, you're sort of still feeling things out. You don't really know the guests. You don't really know the format. Things are a little unfamiliar. But as you maybe listen to one or two or three episodes within a certain podcast, you get a sense of the people, and it just takes a little bit of time to get that familiarity that I think we love about podcasts. You know, I feel like I know Jad Abumrad and Robert Krulwich, you know.
They become your friends.
Yeah, they're my best friends.
Yes.
I don't know my name. But, you know, like, I really do think it's like walking into a stranger's house and trying to feel comfortable immediately. Like, that's never going to happen. So it is important to, you know, listen to other podcasts, get a sense of who they are, and just keep exploring, because there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out right now, especially. So
yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's one thing I was trying to get at with my website. Like, I also felt, like you said, Rebecca, super overwhelmed. Like, okay, there's tens of thousands of things I can listen to. Like, I don't know, where do you even start? And I got quickly like tired of listening to the things that everybody listens to. Like, I still listen to them, like you guys said. But I feel like there's so much like fresh stuff. And I've been so pleasantly surprised by so many people that have contacted me. I'm so grateful that people contact me and ask me to review their shows, to give them a little bit of extra publicity. And so that's why in the bottom of my reviews, I have a little, if you like this show, you might like these other shows. Because that's the thing that's what I feel like I was missing the most, was like, okay, well, I like This American Life, but what do I really like about it? And what is like it? And like, try to put some, you know, categories and some tags together, and then some straight up recommendations. Like, if you like, you know, This American Life, you'll probably like The Moth and whatever, like, just things like that. Just to give people a next place to go if you want to try something similar. So yeah. I see the need for that for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, Sarah, how long have you been doing your project?
I have been doing this for about a year now. I started, like, I don't know, I guess I sort of like decided I was going to do a website about in August of 2015, and I don't know anything about websites, and I don't know how to code or anything. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, I don't know, should I even do this or not? Is this like a totally like silly like endeavor? But WordPress makes it super easy to do a blog. And you know, in the beginning, I've definitely tweaked things along the way. I've added more features, added in the guest reviews, which is kind of fun. Adela's done a guest review for me, which is awesome. And hope to do more of that. Just adding more features. Ideally, one place I want to go in the future is I want to have some kind of better selector for exactly what we were just talking about. Like, if you loved This American Life, like some kind of selector, like here's some, like I don't know, I'm envisioning like some kind of cloud thing. Like, you know, these are some other similar ones that you might like, instead of having to search for, I mean, you could search for This American Life on my page too, but that's someplace I want to go in the future. And I've done about, I don't know, 50 or 60 reviews. Try to do one a week or so. Some weeks it doesn't happen. I do have a real job. And then I also do with the newsletter that comes out every other week. And that's a little bit extra stuff, more my personal thoughts about podcasting, and just some more shout outs to more independent people. I'd really like to give people a chance to be heard. And then I also do on Fridays, I do a delicious ingredients. That's the best stuff that I heard in the last week. So several other reviewers do something like that as well. So mine comes out on Fridays, and it's not necessarily shows that have come out during that week, but things that I listened to that week and I thought were like amazing. And sometimes it's mainstream, and sometimes it's independence, and sometimes there's just something about an episode that just strikes me. Maybe everyone else didn't like it, but I just want to give it a little shout out. One thing that's been still, I think, growing for me is my integration with social media. I have a Facebook page, still kind of a lesser platform for me. But Twitter is a good platform for me. One of the podcast creators that I've worked with before has really helped me work on my Twitter presence and talk to me a little bit. He said he was learning too. So he was like, let's just go through this together. I love that about the podcast community, that people are like so helpful and just like willing to share everything. Like I have like a handful of awesome podcasts that tweet my stuff all the time. I love it. It's like Stride and Saunter. They're awesome. Like I think it's a really nice, still sort of small community. And I just really like being part of it.
So I don't know if you saw, but Ray just asked if you review at random or on request.
Both.
So
both.
Yeah.
So send me a note at audiblefeast@gmail.com and tell me about your show. I have excuse me. I'm happy to say I have probably 30 on my list right now of shows that people have asked me to review. Again, when I started this a year ago, I would have been, that's funny. Podcast Digest. Thank you. It's okay. Send them over. Because I will get to them. It may take me a while, but I do try to listen. There's a lot of the ones people have asked me about. Like you said, Adela, I've listened to, like 1 or 2 episodes, but for me, that is also, I don't feel that's enough to do a review. I want to at least listen to about 5 episodes. That's roughly my 4 or 5 is usually my threshold. And it helps if you can tell me a little bit about the show. That really will sell it. It tell me what you want me to know about it. And I will, right now I get small enough to be able to help you still, spread your message. Like I have enough time to still be able to do that. Maybe someday I'll have people helping me and I'll approach the Timber, Long Live the Timber, sad website that is no longer with the output of production of podcast reviews. But for now, it's just probably 1 a week.
Yeah. And I would just want to give a shout out to Ray too, because Ray and I have been in communication. He and I have been working on potentially launching a podcast brunch club in Melbourne.
Awesome.
So about that, I'll get in touch with you, Ray, soon. I know I've probably dropped the ball a little bit. And I know he actually just started a podcast called The Razor Sharp Show, which I believe is a business podcast. So I'm going to reach out to him after everything settles down. And it's a business podcast. So, and it's just, I want to sort of reiterate how great everybody has been. I went to Podcast Movement. I'm in Chicago anyway, so it was easy for me. And I went to Podcast Movement, and that's how I got hooked up with International Podcast Day. And I'm going to give a shout out now to Podcast Digest, which is another great show to listen to, an awesome friend. He, so I was talking to him, and he introduced me to Dave of the International Podcast Day. And Dave and I had this conversation about, there's so many groups for creators. There's so many, not so many. I think that there should probably be more because there are so many creators and there's only more. But so he's being modest. It's a very good podcast. And he actually interviewed me at Podcast Movement.
Awesome.
Which was really fun. But, there's not a whole lot of ways for the listener side of things to kind of get together in the same way. And that sort of was the impetus for Podcast Brunch Club. It's a way to get together in person, online. For those of you who sort of missed the beginning, Podcast Brunch Club is like a listener community. We have chapters all over the world. You can just go to podcastbrunchclub.com to learn more, sign up for the newsletter. I just sent it out yesterday. But you can get the listening list for October. It's Fear. And I'm going to start a podcast, which is sort of exciting and very meta and crazy. But one of the ways that I really want to engage listeners, and I'm sure a lot of the podcast creators out there that are watching right now want to do the same, is I want to get input. So I want people to write comments about the listening list or send in voice memos. And I want to see if there's a way I can create a podcast out of just those comments, and as a way to kind of deepen the conversation. So all these little pods of people all over the world are having conversations in groups of 5, 10, 15 or whatever. But I want to bring that back to the larger group. Either we have the Facebook group, which is one way, but through the podcast, get people to send in their comments. So maybe after the Podcast Brunch Club meetup in Melbourne, Ray could send me a voice memo and say, like, these were these were the highlights of the conversation, or this is how I feel about do too many kids go to college, and just, give me and the other thing that I really aim to do with Podcast Brunch Club, not only do I want to give people exposure to different podcasts, but I want to give people exposure to other people. I think that we're walking around with earbuds in all the time, and we're looking at our phones, and it's just a way for people to put the phone away for a second and talk to each other face to face. And a lot of times it's a way to connect with them over topics you wouldn't necessarily otherwise talk about, and give personal experiences. So you end up sharing more than you would normally. Sometimes the groups are a group of friends, so it's not that big a deal, but sometimes it's a group of strangers, and sharing personal anecdotes with them. It just creates a different level of conversation and a different connection with people that I think, is missing in today's world, unfortunately. And I personally love to hear I love to hear Malcolm Gladwell's perspective as much as I love to hear Rebecca Kane's perspective on it. So it's a good way to, to just deepen the conversation and make people feel like they're part of a larger conversation, but still having their intimate conversations around the world, wherever they live. So that's sort of.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think you were saying about, connecting with strangers, and how, that can be sort of scary, but to have those like more deep conversations, connect on a different level. But I think that's even true with friends also. Like just being able to talk to somebody about something that is, I don't know, like beyond the like small talk, just like, I think it's nice. Like I just had an experience last weekend with a mom friend that I know what her job is. She's a criminal justice professor. So we were talking about the Code Switch episode about trigger warnings. Like, so I'd much rather talk to her about that than like about our kids that are playing in the pool. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's fine, but no offense to my children, but like, it's so, like I'm happy to connect with people about intelligent things. Like I think that's super lacking, and that's almost more comfortable for me than the small talk. Like there's only so much you can say. The weather and the sports and whatever. Like just talk about some real stuff.
And I mean, I know Rebecca feels the same way. Rebecca, I know she's been a little reluctant to even jump on the technology bandwagon because it's, she wants to connect with people in person. And, I know you have a lot of thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, this is the work that I do, coming from a place of really helping people to know themselves more so that they can be their truest best self in the world. And a big part of that is how we relate and connect to others. So I'm a strong, avid, firm believer of creating community. And that's what I think is so very cool about what Adela is doing, is creating community around these ideas, these issues, these, real life, as you guys, Sarah and Adela, you're both referring to, like deeper issues. The reality is that, all these really cool, exciting things that are happening in the world that we want to know about, but then all these issues too that only are going to change through dialogue, right? So here are these different ways to create dialogue and an international community, and for people to kind of step outside of their own views. So yeah, to me, it's community. It's creating community and connection.
And the other thing is that, even with friends, right? Like you're always talking to friends, and oftentimes your friends have the exact same opinions as you. So you're just like preaching to the choir. And not that I'm saying I want to start getting in arguments with strangers by any means. That is not my MO. But, you know, having an educated discussion about a topic and using podcasts as a way, sort of a jumping off point. So sometimes our podcast brunch clubs don't really talk so much about the episodes themselves. Sometimes they talk just about the topic and about personal experience around the topic. So I could tell people, you know, for higher education that I was hell-bent against getting a master's degree after having gotten my bachelor's degree and finding it somewhat useless, you know, and having learned way more on the job than I ever did in school, and just being really against it. But, you know, so it's around the topic of higher education, but it's not necessarily about the podcast. But I'm still sharing a personal story about myself that, you know, either somebody relates to or somebody doesn't, but we have a discussion about it, and it just creates that connection.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm totally with you guys.
Yeah, and that's how we find meaning, is being able to have that space to create or express the stories that we have. And so by doing this, you're taking, as you say, people out of their experience with their earbuds to now even make deeper meaning and share parts of their stories with people. So yeah, it's really exciting. I have to give Adela credit for really turning me on to spending more time to venture into the podcast world, and even igniting in me this desire to see it as a really cool way and tool to share what I do with people. So yeah, I'm excited for both of you.
Yeah.
So I think we're coming up at the end of our 55 minutes, but Sarah, do you want to give a quick you know, blurb about Audible Feast and how people can participate?
Yep. So one more time, the website is audiblefeast.com. Audible, like the audio service, and feast, like you want to eat a lot. And I post a few times a week something. I post something on there. I'm on Twitter. It's actually audible_feast on Twitter. And I have my newsletter. That's tinyletter.com/audiblefeast. That comes out every other week. So it's not a super, you know, it's not all the time or anything. I don't feel like I have enough to say more than once every other week. So I'm not going to annoy you with more than that. I do try to do reviews once a week. And I'm looking forward to having more guest reviews from people like you, Adela.
Yeah, I'd love to. I have some. And then Podcast Brunch Club, you just go to podcastbrunchclub.com, sign up for the newsletter, join the Facebook group, follow me on Twitter. It's @Podcast Brunch. There's lots of information there on how to start a new chapter. If you want to just get in touch with me, my email is Adela, Adela, @podcastbrunchclub.com. So that's my little spiel. And then Rebecca.
So yeah, and my business is Tell a New Story Coaching. So providing professional job and career and life transition coaching to people. And I will be in the future starting a podcast, but I'm at www.tellanewstorycoaching, all one word.com. So that's me.